Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 7 of Mahou Shoujo Madoka Magica. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, as I recall, everyone is still sort of reeling from that whole business about learning that a soul gem is a little more literal than one would necessarily assume. You know, obviously, Sayaka's not taking this particularly well, since really, she's the only one who's actually a magical girl and not totally nihilistic at this point. Although I do think this bit right here is interesting in that this is kind of the first part where QB really drops the mask here. You know, it's not so much that he told deliberate lies, but he did deliberately omit information, and he sort of, well, I don't know, like, I guess a good way to put it is he didn't show them the fine print. Like, it really is not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination, but this is, I think, the first time you really see what horrible depths that Kyubey is operating on. I mean, the worst part is that Kyubey is fairly rational about this whole thing. You know, he's making a good point here about how if your fragile human body gets impaled, you're going to be out of commission, but if all of the important bits are stored somewhere else and your body is effectively just a corpse, then, you know, it makes you more effective and more efficient. And you know, it sort of makes that fight with Kyoko make more sense in retrospect, considering how heavily Sayaka had gotten battered around. Of course, there's the whole issue about informed consent here. You know, not to put too fine a point on it, but they didn't know this was exactly what they were getting into. You know, I think the voice actors did a really good job of really presenting how utterly soulless Kyubey is. So it just sort of seems like it's back to business as usual. I mean, I know Sayaka just had this massive truth dropped on her, but there's not necessarily anything she can do, you know, other than choose to go about her life or mope. You know, thinking just in practical terms, there's really not much you can do to change the situation. So, now we're in the unfortunate position of having to listen to Homer sort of explain things rationally. You know, she knew about this whole business, but she couldn't really tell anyone. Her reasoning being that they simply wouldn't have listened to her. And that does make sense, considering how untrusting they've been towards her and how shady she's acted. You know, I feel like both parties are at fault here. So, it seems like Kyubei's not the only one dropping the truth like a hammer here. You know, the idea is that the boy Sayaka likes would never have gotten better, and therefore the wish that Sayaka made was worth more than her life. So, effectively, you know, she's an indentured magical girl for the rest of her life. And, you know, had she known that going in, that might have tempered the choice she made. You know, not necessarily considering how, I guess, single-minded she's been. You know, I think everybody's being pretty blasé about not being human, especially Homura. Of course, I'm sure she has her own reasons for it, but at the same time, you know, maybe saying, the reason I'm so detached is likely because I'm not human. You know, that's not gonna fix any of the problems you're currently experiencing. You know, nobody's going to trust you more when you proclaim that I am no longer human and therefore I am detached from humans. So, in contrast to Sayaka, Kyoko is aware of this whole business, but she seems to be so deeply nihilistic that it doesn't really bother her. I mean, I guess Kyoka's rationalization for everything does make a certain kind of sense, but I think that really what she's saying, that, you know, working for yourself and only being able to blame yourself, that really only sort of bears out if you get into this situation knowingly, which Sayaka did not. So I guess paradoxically, well, maybe not paradoxically, but Kyoka had previously just basically battered Sayaka half to death, and now she wants to be all buddy-buddy and talk. I mean, I guess she hasn't calmed down entirely. She's pretty heated, given how Sayaka just tossed that apple aside. You know, I'm sure there's good reason for that too, but her seeming change of character, well, that might be putting it too strongly. It seems like she's just sort of opening up, probably because of Sayaka's whole misadventure with finding out she's no longer human. Alright, so I think I know where this is going. Sayaka had essentially made a selfless wish as well, and in doing so has sort of doomed herself for no great reason. Of course, you know, maybe it doesn't necessarily help that her father is behaving like a heretic. You know, adapting religion to current day is all well and good, but, you know, like, you can't deviate in some respects and call it the same religion. And I know from my few readings that a lot of the Bible is allegorical or metaphorical. Like, some of it you can't read literally. I guess it's more an issue that people perhaps read into it too literally when they should be thinking more in terms of allegory. But I guess that's really neither here nor there. The point here is that Sayaka and Kyoko sort of have something in common here in that they both made a wish to help someone else. It seems to me that Kyoko is merely further along the path that Sayaka is heading down. So, Kyoko had made a wish for someone else, and presumably it had gone horribly wrong at some point, leading her to become a nihilist. And presumably, Sayaka's sort of like halfway along that path, in that things are not really great right now, so she can either accept things as they are and continue trying to live, or she can give up. And while Sayaka doesn't exactly have the best outlook, in my view, it's certainly better than just sitting around and waiting to die. Yeah, there really is a lot of unfathomably bleak stuff in Madoka Magica. And to a degree, I feel like, I don't know, some of it's just for shock value. This to me seems like it's kind of leaning towards shock value. Like, the whole murder-suicide thing. Like, I can kind of get that, but if this guy was so pious as Kyoko suggests he is, murder and suicide are strictly off limits. Granted, people aren't perfect. But even so, one would think it's just not something to be done lightly. So Sayaka has cleverly noticed the crux of this conversation in that Sayaka, well, she seems to be the goal here. Kyoka is trying to help her while talking about how she's only in it for herself. And, the obvious reasoning is that they are essentially kindred spirits now. And perhaps spirit is, a bit more literal than I intended. So, despite this whole little encounter, Sayaka has decided to take the opposite approach. Rather than becoming a self-interested nihilist, she's instead going to work for the betterment of everyone else and endeavor not to regret anything she does ever again. Now, sitting here in the real world, I can tell you that that's probably a fool's errand. Sometimes through no fault of your own, something will happen that you regret. I guess this is sort of Sayaka's one big flaw here, in that she is stubborn. Incredibly stubborn. Perhaps it would be better to heed a little bit of what Kyoko's saying. Even if she is a nihilist, maybe discounting everything she says to her face was the wrong approach. You could at least humor her. Ah, dear. It's very clear that even though Sayaka is now returning to school, she's still not herself. So Madoka knows why, but Sayaka's trying to put up a front here. Of course, she can't really hide things now that Kyosuke's out of the hospital and limping around. I mean, he's considerably better than he was just lying in a hospital bed, but he's still not in great shape regardless. So it seemed like, to me, if I remember correctly, he was in the traction ward, considering he had, I guess, gotten pretty mangled in some sort of accident. He lost motor function in his arms and legs. Maybe not arms, but at least fingers, something that would interfere with playing the violin. But you know, I guess that wish really did its job in that he's up and walking again. Although, his legs are still probably a little bit atrophied just from disuse. Oh dear, so if it wasn't enough, now Hitomi has to drop the hammer on Sayaka. As it turns out, they're part of a love triangle here. So I remember around the time the show came out that a lot of people seemed to be kind of down on Hitomi for this whole thing. But it really seems to me that she isn't really doing anything wrong. You know, she's just sort of doing her due diligence here by her friend. You know, the idea here is she's trying to clear the air, make sure that Sayaka is no competition. You know, basically, like, if you like him, like, you know, go ahead and initiate things. Like, I'll wait for you, but not forever. Oh dear, so Hitomi even says it. You know, act so that you don't have any regrets. Obviously, she doesn't know about the conversation Sayaka had with Kyoko, but man, I'm noticing a pattern here, and it's not good. So basically, Sayaka's got a very important choice to make. You know, she already made the wish on Kyosuke's behalf, but is she going to confess now? And if she doesn't, will she regret the entire thing? And from my personal experience, you know, if you don't take the chance, you will in all likelihood regret it more than having taken the chance and failing. I guess it's sort of like that old Wayne Gretzky quote, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so you might as well take a shot. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but the idea is solid. So it seems to me that Sayaka is taking a very defeatist approach here. You know, it's a big conflux of everything. You know, she's effectively a corpse, so she feels she can't ask him out, and because of that, she's going to lose him to Hitomi. I don't know, something's gotta give, and I feel like the wrong thing gave here. This is ultimately going to be a bad outcome. You know, corpse aside, I feel like her body's still sufficiently lifelike for Kyosuke to not know any better. I mean, maybe that's a ghoulish thing to say, but, at least you could try. I feel like giving up this prematurely is only going to make everything infinitely worse. Speaking of worse, I get the feeling that Sayaka and Kyoko are going to run into each other again antagonistically. Okay, well, I take that back. Considering how Kyoka and Homura are talking, they both seem to be watching Sayaka fighting a witch. The idea being that if Sayaka can handle herself against a real witch, then, maybe she's worth something after all. So I think this is an interesting artistic choice here, in that everything is just entirely silhouette. It lends an air of, all seriousness. Everything's very bleak and stark and black and white. Like, there are little hints of color here and there distinguishing characters from each other, but by and large, it's just black on white. So there's a marked difference in how Sayaka acts now. She's not even going to humor Kyoka. And it seems like she's really gone off the deep end by this point. Even as the witch lashes out and strikes her, she doesn't react. For as much as she despairs about being effectively an automaton of flesh and bone, one would think she shouldn't revel in it so much. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.